Hi, everyone. I'm Shana Naomi Krochmal from Entertainment Weekly. I am very happy to be here with Sound of Metal. We have Darius Marner, the director.
Hi,
Hello.
hi, how are you?
And Riz Ahmed, who's the star of this film. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about the film, which the students have just seen. And I'm going to start right at the beginning. I'd love to hear a little bit more. I've talked to both of you before. I love this film. We've been really happy at EW to support it. We think it's great. Tell us where it started, because I know it was a long journey to get here. So Darius, do you want to start with the sort of earliest germ of this, but then kind of quickly bring us forward to how we got to this place where we've just finished watching it?
Well, it was many, 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 many years ago was the earliest germ. And a germ is a good word. It's like it's almost
Right
germ, germ or infection. No, we won't use that word right now.
now? Okay.
No, I met I didn't meet Derek C in France 13 years ago. We actually met a couple years earlier, but we ended up, both of our children ended up in the same class in Brooklyn. And we were at we met, I think we just talked about this. I think it was about 13 years ago. And the very first thing we spoke about was this movie. And we connected over a documentary, kind of a hybrid documentary idea that Derek was exploring at the time that involved a metal band called Jucifer. They're a real metal band, and it's a man and a woman that travel kind of endlessly, and in their case, in a Winnebago. And that film, which was really, Derek's such a talented filmmaker, and he was making such a beautiful, very hard to explain hybrid film at the time, shooting it on 16 millimeter. And it was so evocative and so gorgeous. And I ended up really getting interested. I edited a lot of it at the time and got very interested in this idea of sound and picture, and this whole concept, and some ideas took root in me personally as a writer. And I kind of realized I needed to write it. Derek was exploring this from a kind of a documentary standpoint, which was wonderful. And I said to him at some point, we should do, I see this as a narrative. So eventually it became clear that after we did Place Beyond the Pines, he wasn't ever going to do that film, and I was going to. So I kind of adopted it. And that's how it started.
And then you wrote the script together with your brother. Is that right?
Yeah, I wrote for a couple of years, or a year and a half or so, myself, and then my brother. Actually, one time I was about to travel to this little cabin and force myself to write for a little while, and I said to my bro, "Hey, do you want to come and play music while I write?" And because he's a musician, and he was like, "Sure." So we got a lot of food. We went to the middle of nowhere, and we just started talking about the script, and basically started writing together, and just didn't stop. And my brother's a wonderful writer.
How long was it from the sort of period where you first started having those conversations to when you met Riz and Riz became a part of that conversation?
Well, from the point of, if I take it from meeting, the very first moment, it was a good 7 years or something, 8 years. But from the moment of really beginning to write it, it was probably about 4 or 5 years before I met Riz.
How did the
And
two of you find each other?
well, Riz, do you maybe you want to speak to that from your vantage?
Well, from my vantage point, I didn't know Darius, but I knew his work without knowing that it was his work. In the two of the films that really stood out for me.
Don't say Blue Valentine, because that wasn't really my credit.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was The Life Story of Darius Marder. That's
Yeah,
one of my
that was a
favorites.
huge one, and that still has a big, deep part for me.
But also, look, Place Beyond the Pines, for real. I mean, I was actually writing my own kind of multi-generational saga at the time,
Right.
as a feature. I didn't know how to write, really. I was just trying to scramble together bits and bobs from my own community and my life story. And I was in Toronto in 2012, and I remember the Place Beyond the Pines screening, and I just remember just having my mind blown. Just love the idea of just like doing a trilogy in one movie, and it just spoke to me so deeply, and it just really stayed with me. And I remember, actually, we were talking about Q&As. I was that dude at the end of the Q&A who was lingering by the stage. And I was lingering by the stage, just kind of going, I wasn't sure what I was really wanting to say. I just wanted to kind of, I don't know, just say thank you. Thank you for making this film. And
you never told me that. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's really stayed with me and still stayed with me. And
wait, did you actually talk to him? Did you get the chance to do that, or was it too crowded?
No, it was kind of like crowded, and I felt like I didn't want to be that guy. So I just kind of like...
You were intimidated by me? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I just felt like you were getting too much attention. I didn't want to encourage that dynamic. Yeah, I wasn't the annoying person at the front talking too much. I was the creepy person 4 people back, just like stood there like...
Oh, that's right. I actually do remember a creepy feeling.
That was me.
That was you.
Like watching you.
That's so interesting the way you feel those things.
Exactly. So we had that connection from 2012. But then my agent sent me the script. And in a way I came to it in a very pure way, because it was just the words on the page. As I said, I didn't look up Darius. I didn't know what the history was of the project, understand its long history. I just read the script from start to finish in one sitting, and it was heartbreaking and mind-blowing and overwhelmingly emotional. And I just thought, this is incredible. Can I meet this person? And we met in LA, and I think, and it was just a kind of one of those meetings where we just immediately connected. Darius is such a kind of open-hearted person, who wears his heart on his sleeve, and I also like to kind of let it all out. And so we just cut through a lot of the bullshit really early on, and we just connected in a really personal way and spoke about actually how much of us was in this character, how much Darius spoke about how much of him was in that character, and I felt like how much of me was in this, and we just kind of clicked from there, really.
And Riz, I think that, I'm sorry, I would just add that I think that what you probably don't understand from my perspective in that moment is, the odyssey that I had been on to cast this role. Like, you were coming into it just as another script or another project and clearly connected with it. But for me, this was year, I don't know what, 3, 4 of casting the movie. And part of the reason that it took so long to cast was because casting movies hard. But part of it was because I really hadn't found that energy yet. So for, and that energy is so specific, like that energy that you brought to this role that I felt in that first meeting is a mix of openness, a desire for vulnerability, and an incredible sense of bravery. And putting aside the talent that you have, which was already apparent, and is vast and really, I think you're really one of the bright lights in the acting world right now. But apart from that, it was the energy that you had is so unique. So I was really struck in that first meeting. I was looking across at this guy going, man, a few weeks ago, I didn't even know your work, and I wasn't that familiar with you, but I'm looking across at this person going, holy shit, this is real.
The movie is so much from Ruben's point of view, right? It's such a tight point of view. I feel like you're in every scene, right? Like, it's just this constant moment or sort of a journey of feeling how he is experiencing everything. And it required a lot of learning before you ever got to the point of shooting it. Can we talk a little bit about, there are at least 2, maybe more, key skills that my understanding is you really had to learn for this film, Riz. You had to learn how to drum, which you do quite passively. It's like very convincing that you are a punk metal drummer. And you also had to learn ASL and learn it to a degree to which you could easily improv and like kind of have conversations with characters. Can you talk a little bit about the prep for that? It was just an immersive process, really, of even getting to where you started to shoot the film. So I'm curious, Riz, from your perspective, how that was, and also Darius, why, sort of, how do you broach that with an actor? How are you like, I want you to do this, but by the way, here are all of the things that we're not going to cheat and we're not going to fake, and you're going to have to get up in front of an audience and play live music, and you're going to have to be able to have this conversation. How do you approach an actor? And then Riz, how do you really commit to that, and what are the challenges of it?
Well, I'll just quickly answer the first part of that, and then you can take it, Riz. The approach to the actor is was really interesting to me, because I think that the actors' response to those challenges said everything about whether they were the right actor for this movie. And I often had very difficult conversations with people that were connected with the movie, whether in my agents or this or that, because I would scare actors a lot, and because I was saying, and it's understandable, even from the actor's perspective, because they don't know me. This is my first narrative feature, and that's a huge leap of faith to make with the director. So I would just keep doing it anyway, and basically say, this is what I want. This is what I'm, I want, like you said, live music without protection, without cutaways. I want a real audience. I want like a real experience of falling into deafness with ear stuff, all the stuff that we did that created real experience. And again, Riz, I'll let you speak to that, but your response to that told me everything.
Were you scared?
I tried to leave. He physically restrained me. But I think he admired my spirit in trying to wrestle him. He's a much bigger man than I am. That was what he admired. Now, to be honest, it was daunting, but it's also what's so attractive about it, right? You've got to kind of go where the fear is and go into the unknown. And I think he just caught me at a moment when I was really looking to push myself in new ways and kind of, I guess, go beyond my usual process. I think I was just looking for a new way in to keep this thing that I love, acting, alive for me. And at that moment, it felt like it wasn't as alive as it had been. I think I'd kind of had my first couple of experiences of bigger studio movies, which in some ways kind of really lit up new parts of my brain. And it's a different kind of athleticism, a different kind of marathon, a different kind of adaptability you have to have on those. And yet something in the magic of some of the earlier work I was lucky to be a part of, those independent movies where it's so intimate, it's all hands on deck and there's no safety net. I was missing that. And so I was kind of looking for some way to, I guess, mainline my way back into the aliveness of what this job can be. And I guess, yeah, that challenge was at once overwhelming, but it was a massive privilege. I don't want to kind of harp on about how difficult it was. It was difficult mainly because I'm not a naturally gifted drummer, and ASL was something that was, wasn't easy to pick up overnight. I was basically doing both every day for 7 months, and it's down to the patience and compassion of my teachers, Jeremy Stone, my sign instructor, Guy Licata, my drum teacher, who kind of, you spend 2 hours a day with each of these guys for 7 months. They kind of become your therapists as well, even if your therapy is non-verbal, even if your expression is physical. So it was a tremendous privilege and it was really enriching. And I would say that it did end up opening me up in new ways in terms of my physicality. I think it just, again, the non-verbal communication. I'm a rapper, I use words a lot. And this was about kind of taking that crutch away, taking the mask of words away and being forced to communicate with something more visceral, more primal, more embodied. And I think that really informed the whole process in ways actually that I hadn't even anticipated.
When you were going from those 7 months of training and into actual production, was there a scene that you were most nervous about how you guys were going to pull it off? I'm curious about this from both your perspective, that you're like, okay, God, now I have to be in front of the camera and act and drum or sign or do whatever. Like, was there a specific scene that you were trepidatious of, thinking about like, okay, this is going to be the one that's really the test?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the gig, which you end up starting the movie on, and we knew that it would basically be one of the first things we'd shoot as well. If not,
because we were shooting chronologically, right? So
yeah.
We knew that.
Yeah.
So you're playing, there's a live audience. There was like a mosh pit. I mean, like people were like into.
Yeah, that was a club in Boston.
Yeah, we went to Boston, hired out a club and played a gig. And, I had 7 months to learn those drums and stuff and to try and understand the whole deal alongside the SL. But Olivia Cook came in with 2 months to go and had to learn the guitar, loop pedals, and that particular style of kind of screaming, I guess, you know, that Pharmacon, who's an amazing noise artist, you know, worked with her and taught her.
It's very hard to scream. It's like
yeah.
you try it, just try it. It's hard.
And so that was, I guess that was a big one. And I guess another scene that I was just had in the back of my mind, but it's tricky because it's one of those scenes where, because it's an emotional scene, you kind of don't want to look at it directly. You're aware of it and you know it's there and you're kind of trying to prepare around it, but you also can't, in a way, allow yourself to, is the scene with Joe, the goodbye scene with Joe, because that whole scene is signed. And so you can kind of see the edges of frame or whatever. I'm signing back and forth with Joe. Paul Racy, who plays Joe, is a child of deaf adults and he's fluent in signing. And so it was quite daunting, the idea of kind of really having this quite emotional acting scene with him that I'm also signing. And again, what I found is, and I think it's something that Ruben's found over the course of the story as well, is that the challenge is actually the gifts. You know, the challenge of signing this scene just allowed it to be embodied in a way that was much more profound.
Yeah, you felt that palpably in that scene and the shooting of that scene. And yeah, it's a totally different cerebral process or non-cerebral process because you had that physicality going, that other part of your brain working simultaneously with your emotions. And man, it's such an act of courage. It's hard to even explain at this stage of it. The music prior to that shooting, you know, I had just bet the farm on it, you know, and as ill-advised as that was, I completely bet the farm on it. And so much so that I didn't shoot shots that would allow me to fake it. You know, I did not shoot cutaways that would have allowed me to cut it and pretend that these guys knew what they were doing. And so I kind of dared them and dared the universe to raise that bar and raise that level and to describe the level of fear that these guys had, which I say with a great respect because they were rightly afraid. You know, it's an insanely difficult thing to pull off what they pulled off. And they just were willing to do it. You know, they were willing to keep pushing. I remember that practice the day before the gig, the music rehearsal, and the amount of terror that you guys were experiencing in that. It was so palpable.
You scared you? Like, how long did it take for your nerves about, like, did I bet the farm on this and it's all going to blow up on my face? Or like, what, did you have a moment, especially if you're going chronologically?
I just enjoyed it. I mean, I just like let her rip, you know. Like that day we shot the concert, I enjoyed the shit out of that day. Like I just felt like, man, you only go this way once in life. I'll never do this again. This is the most alive feeling, you know. Yeah, nerves, but not really like that. That was just all about like, I'm so excited we're doing this, you know, and we're just going to see what happens. I really felt a lot of empathy for these actors, you know, for Riz and Olivia, because I knew how scary it was, how absolutely scary, but I also felt so proud that they were showing up with that amount of fear and courage, because I just felt so proud of them, you know, that they were, you know, we shot the concert, you know, the song many times, and every time they just brought it, and with this level of energy it's really hard to explain. And that drum piece that Riz is playing, you know, we had a professional drummer there that you know was kind of like just like a tech support who could barely get through that piece. It's an outrageously difficult piece in a certain way. It's very, very hard to maintain that energy through that whole piece. And Riz, it's just outrageous. Every time I watch it, I feel the same sense of pride.
It sets a really realistic tone. I mean, like, you believe it. Like, you have no question. This guy knows how to, he is a drummer. This is his life, and this is what's at risk, which I feel like really helps set the pace for the rest of the film. I want to talk about the sound for a minute, because there's some great choices. Also, a thing I just learned today is that all of SCAD will have an ASL interpreter during all of the panels. Not just
I'm so glad to hear that.
which I
Great.
thought you would be glad to hear. And they're also going to caption this so that folks will be able to read it. The film itself, as it's been released, not just for how everyone just saw it, but in theaters and on Amazon, will include hard open captions throughout. So everything is captioned or descriptioned, right? There's no version of this is going out in the world without that.
Well, the only thing I'll say about that is on the platform, the only question is whether you have it as an option or not. And the reason for that is that, you know, it's been a long discussion that we've had. Certainly in theaters, the film will be open captioned, which is, you know, it's happened before probably on films, but I don't think it's happened at this level on a film of this size. And that's a cultural experiment essentially, which is saying that everybody watches it on the same even footing. On a platform, it's a little different because what happens is a lot of people have their existing captioning set, and what can happen is they get double captions. If you play it with open captions, they end up getting double captions. So it's this whole technical thing that we've been discussing. So that's the only detail there, is whether it will be, you know, it may be an option on the platform, but it will certainly be open captioned in theaters.
And yet also, I mean, there's great audio description in that text, but you also have like really exquisite sound design in this film. And you spent, I think the notes I read said something like 20 weeks mixing the sound. Can you talk just a little bit about that process? And Riz, as an actor, like the way that they would capture some of the sound of your body and the physicality of what you were doing is really striking and not something I'm super familiar with having been used before.
Mm-hmm. So normally at the end of a scene, a boom operator will come in, the sound recordist will come in and say, can you do this, the lines again, get a wild track so that they can use it in the edit. In this film, after we shot the scene, Nicola, our sound recordist.
Sound designer.
Sorry?
Sound designer.
Sound designer. But he was recording. You know, he would come up to us with a kind of rig and put it against my chest, some kind of bizarre hexagonal kind of 3D printed object, and put it against my chest.
It
was like this big. It was like this big. It was like this, and he'd put it against my chest, and he'd say, right, now I want you to just swallow. And then he'd say, now I want you to breathe. Now hold your breath. Okay, just hold your breath. Let me just get your heartbeat. Now blink. Okay, blink. Now move your tongue around on the inside of your teeth. Only thing he didn't ask me to do was break wind. But they ended up capturing all this kind of, like, these amazing, you've got that too. All these incredible kind of, this inner landscape, this inner audioscape to model Ruben's hearing experience as his external hearing diminishes so that his hearing becomes more internalized and vibrational within his body. And I'm not sure that anything like this has been attempted before in movies, you know. You know, and certainly not for a film at this scale. I think, you know, usually you have these blockbuster movies that have hundreds of audio tracks. But I think from, you know, speaking to you, Darius, the audio tracks on this film are endless. The level of kind of the amount of layers and texture and attention to detail, I think the sound design on this is kind of exceptional. And like I said, I'm not sure it's been attempted before in this way.
Well, we did some really wacky things with sound, which started, we did have a 23-week sound mix just unto itself, was absolutely massive. It's longer than most picture edits, but actually the sound design started a couple years before we shot. And I met Nicolas many years. It even started before I met Nicolas. I was planning the sound of this movie for years. But then when I met Nicolas, we started doing some recording, vast and long discussions about how to marry picture and sound, and we started recording inside of skulls and underwater and all sorts of crazy stuff. And then we had kind of a meta experience of sound on set, and that was really exciting to us. Nicolas actually made me a score as my director score that was a very experiential score that I would listen to every day while I was preparing for the day, and it was kind of an interesting sonic meditation. And then Riz had through most of the shooting that involved his layers and process of going deaf, he had ear implants that would emit a white noise, and not just a white noise. It could emit a high pitched, like kind of a ringing. And then, so it had progressions, and I actually had an iPhone that I could control the actual sonic experience Riz was having. So it was really, I got to be very kind of evil. And again, Riz was courageous enough to, to kind of relinquish control and to give into an experience where the idea of this was that he was having a sonic experience that we would eventually end up experiencing from an audience perspective. So that the experience that, in that way, it became a little bit meta, like what was going on set actually ended up being what you feel in the movie. And it was really exciting.
As you know, the Savannah Film Festival is put on by SCAD, and so most of our audience here today is students. And part of why I honestly feel like I've been focusing on the length of this journey is I'm thinking of my own questions I might have had as a student about, you just want things to happen now, like you want them to have already happened. And I think there's like a beauty in that impatience of being young and ambitious and what you want to do. And then I think we all know the reality often of the business that we work in is that things can take years to get to where you are. But what advice, I'd love to hear from both of you, what advice would you have specifically for a student who is, finishing up their studies, is about to enter into the world, particularly in this sort of challenging moment for the industry of movie making? Is there something that either someone has told you, or that if you have the opportunity to share, that you would like to share with the students of SCAD about their careers and where they go from here?
Go ahead, you go first, man.
Well, I mean, I feel one of the really amazing things about the creative process and about this process is you never get there. There is no there. And that's what is absolutely, I think, essential to the focus, that this process, if you can't trust in process, it's absolute misery. That the process is so hard, and you have to really want it, and it's out of your control, and we're not doing this very difficult work just to get it done. Mm-hmm. We're not doing a film to put it into the world to get a film done so we can do another film. That sounds like some horrible kind of punishment. This is about the process. So that feeling of being in process, and it is actually an act of faith. It's actually a spiritual process. You're having faith in something that at first doesn't exist, that you can't see, and you're having faith in a process that's going to show you the way that you can't control. So you engage in that wholeheartedly. You engage in that process with faith, without a surety, and you find joy in each stage in it. And I was telling you about that, and this was really long. This was 13 years, and the film I made before that was many, 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 many years. But I was saying about that part when I was with Nicola, and I was loving that. I was making the movie. It was years before I would make the movie, but I was making the movie. And when I was writing it for years, I was making the movie. And before I met Riz, I had no idea Riz existed, but he was coming. That's what faith is.
I was stood by the edge of the stage watching you.
Riz, what advice would you like to offer?
I think that's beautiful advice from Darius. I really just want to co-sign that. I think so often we get caught up in this sense of getting to the next thing, getting to the next stage, getting to the next movie, getting to the next scene. You have to just fall in love with and surrender to the process of doing it. And something about making this film really taught me that, reinforced that. I feel like every time I do a movie, or anytime, you're reminded of that in some kind of startling way that feels like you're learning it afresh. And I think something about the making of this film, the way that Darius led us with such faith and such integrity, and encouraged us all to take a leap, whether it was from what we had to prepare before getting to show up and shoot, to the way we were shooting, the fact he decided to shoot on film, which often meant that we might not have had the same amount of takes that we certainly didn't have the same amount of takes. Usually you're seeing things that are like, first, second, third take, and that is a gift as well. And so it's about kind of, because of what that brought to bear, to the filming process. So I guess, yeah, it's surrendering to and savoring the process itself rather than getting caught up in the results. And it's weird because when I wrapped this film, I said to Darius, you know what? I would love people to see this film, but if nobody sees this film, I just still couldn't be happier, because the process of making this was so profoundly enriching for me and for all of us, I think. Deaf, hearing, in between, people behind and in front of the camera. This was about trusting the process. And when you do trust the process, you've already won. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter what the results are. So yeah, I just want to agree with what you were saying, Darius.
Well, the results were really, really gorgeous movie. I'm so glad that it is coming out into the world and people are getting to see it. This is the time that we have for today's conversation. So I want to say thank you to both of you. A virtual round of applause from everyone to you.
Thanks for all your support along the way. We really appreciate it.
You made the kind of movie that's so beautiful. It just feels like, I don't know, I walked out of it the first time. It was like, literally, what can we do to make sure that people see this film and get to experience this kind of just sense of really being in it? And I think so much of what you've expressed here is you feel it in the film. So thank you for making a great movie. Thank you to everyone today here for being still so committed to the magic of movie making and where it will continue to take us. Enjoy the rest of the festival. Thank you to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.